and one.
Good evening, everyone. I'm MaryRose Barranco Morris, President of the National Organization of Italian American Women, Greater New York Region. October is Italian Culture Month, and our region is sponsoring this first of 4 Zoom programs in celebration both of Italian culture and in celebration of NOIAW's 40th anniversary. This month, all of you will be able to participate in all 4 October Zoom programs for just $40. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our guest this evening. Lou Del Bianco. He is an author, educator, and actor, and so on. Tonight, he will present his book, Out of Rushmore's Shadows. It'll be a multimedia presentation replete with his own illustrations. Lou Del Bianco is a nationally recognized children's entertainer and a 6-time Parents' Choice Award winner. His CDs for children have received critical praise from the New York and the Los Angeles Times, TV Guide, Parents Magazine, Child Magazine, and others. Lou's 12 educational one-man shows have traveled to the Northeast for the past 30 years. Lou Del Bianco's latest venture is his most exciting, a one-man show in tribute to his grandfather, Luigi Del Bianco, who was the chief carver on Mount Rushmore. Tonight's multimedia book talk and presentation is based on the true story of his grandfather. Now, please join me in welcoming Lou Del Bianco.
Thank you, MaryRose. Thank you, NOIAW, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. At this point, I'm going to share my screen with you all so I can bring up the multimedia aspects. So just bear with me for a second. Very good. And just an FYI to everyone, if you put me on speaker view, feel free to expand my screen. If you know how to do that, you can go to the corner of the window, just kind of pull it out, keep it in the upper right-hand corner. It won't really interfere with the keynote presentation. So, as you were told, I am an actor, a singer, and a storyteller, and I've been telling stories for, about 33 years now. But this story is very important to me because it's about someone in my family. It's about my grandpa. I guess you can tell who the grandson is and who the grandfather is. That's me, Lou, and that's my grandpa, Luigi. I was my grandfather's only grandson and his namesake. So in the Italian culture, that's a very big deal, as you know. So my grandpa and I had a very, very strong bond and connection. Now, many times when I would visit my grandpa, he loved to show me something that he made with his own 2 hands. I thought this was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. This is a marble bust that my grandfather carved of himself, a self-portrait, out of white Carrara marble. I remember standing on a chair and my grandpa taking my little 5-year-old fingers and feeling his marble Roman profile. I would put his hat on his own carved head, as you see there. But what I remember most of all was my grandfather taking me by the shoulders, and in a very serious voice, he would say, "I am Luigi. You are Luigi." 2 years later, I find this in a drawer. I ask my mother, "Ma, what's this?" And when my mother tells me, my jaw drops to the floor. Can I show this to my friends at school? Now you have to understand, when I was a little boy, I was extremely shy. Probably having 6 sisters and no brothers might have contributed to that, but I'll let you decide. But hearing this information gave me a confidence I never thought I had. I could still remember standing in front of my 2nd grade class, proudly holding that pamphlet and saying, "I want to tell you about my grandpa." And that's why I'm here today, everybody. I want to tell you about my grandpa. His name was Luigi Del Bianco, and he was the chief carver, the master carver on this, the Mount Rushmore National Memorial. That's right. I'm so pleased to tell you that finally my grandfather is part of our American history, and this is his unique story. So here it is, Mount Rushmore. It's iconic, known the world over. We have seen this our whole lives in movies, on television, in those crazy Geico commercials. And if you're not sure where Mount Rushmore is located, it's in the orange-colored state, South Dakota, about 1,800 miles from here. And there are 4 presidents that are honored on what is known as the Shrine of Democracy. George Washington, who started our democracy as our first president. Thomas Jefferson, who expanded our democracy with the Louisiana Purchase and the Declaration of Independence. Teddy Roosevelt, who expanded our democracy with the finishing of the Panama Canal and also protecting national parks and forests. And Abraham Lincoln, who saved our democracy by freeing the slaves and keeping our union together. So there you have it, the 4 presidents on the Shrine of Democracy: Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln, Mount Rushmore. Now you're going to hear this name a lot. This is the genius sculptor who figured out a way to carve 60-foot faces on the side of a mountain. Even today, that would seem like an impossible feat. This sculptor's name was Gutzon Borglum. Now, Gutzon Borglum had 400 men who helped him bring these faces to life. But you should know that Borglum had only one other classically trained stone carver on his level who could assist him in putting the refinement of expression in the faces. That other artist was my grandpa. Now, my grandfather lived in America for 49 years, but he wasn't born here. He was born, yes, you guessed it, in Italia, northern Italy, the region of Friuli, Venezia Giulia, just north of Venice. Trieste is part of Friuli. And in 1910, when my grandfather was 18, he had a dream that many of you and your parents and your grandparents and so on had, the dream to come to America to start a new life. So when he was 18, he wrote to relatives living in Barre, Vermont, to sponsor him. And I always love to ask school children when I perform this program, do you think my grandfather sent an email back in 1910 to his relatives? No, he sent this, a postcard. And how did that postcard get to America in 1910? On a boat. It took 6 weeks for my grandfather to communicate with relatives living in America. Today, it would take 6 seconds with email. We all sometimes forget how slow life was back then. Well, to make a long story short, my grandfather made a couple of trips back and forth from Italy to America over a period of years. Eventually in 1920, he came back and went through Ellis Island and eventually settled in Port Chester, New York, in Westchester County, which is where he raised his family and where I still live. But it was in 1933, after a 12-year association with Gutzon Borglum, that Borglum hired my grandfather to be the chief carver on Mount Rushmore. My grandfather had by far the most important job on the mountain, carving the refinement of expression in the faces. When you look at these faces and you see the humanity in them, as if they could live and breathe, that is from the 2 hands of one person and one person alone, Luigi Del Bianco. So let's take a little trip back in time. This is Mount Rushmore the way you know it. I'm going to show you Mount Rushmore in 1936 when it was still being carved. Isn't that amazing? Look at the little scaffolds on Washington's face. Those scaffolds are 6 feet wide and 4 feet long. Those held the men inside of them so the men would be safe and would not fall to their death. Believe it or not, nobody died while carving Mount Rushmore. That's a fact. And there's my nonno, my grandpa Luigi, the proud artist, in the studio, measuring the features of the models of the faces. And if you look at my shirt and tie and you look at the shirt and tie on my grandfather, we're dressed sort of alike, and there's a reason for that. Let's imagine that my grandfather is in the studio and he's measuring the eye of Abraham Lincoln. And as my grandfather measures the eye, he likes to have a little conversation with his favorite president. It might go a little something like this. President Lincoln, buongiorno. Today we carve the eye, but primo first, we measure the points on the eye. Avanti. My friend, Mr. Lincoln, why do all the people say you have an ugly face? Oh, to me, you have a beautiful face. Quanta si bello. Oh, signore, benvenuto. You come to watch Luigi work, eh? Signore, do you know where you are? I'm going to tell you where you are. You are in the studio of the genius, the master, Mr. Gutzon Borglum. That's right. You see, every day, the master and me, we try to find the best way to measure the small face and move that measurement to the big faces on la montagna, the mountain. You see, in the morning, I measure the small eye, and in the afternoon, I carve the big eye. Si, sono io Luigi. I am carving the eye of the president. Imagine, my friends, the sun beats the back of my head very hot. The wind shakes my scaffold. I feel I'm going to fall out. And the dust makes my face white like a ghost. And signore, the drill that I hold in my hands, that drill is 45 pounds, mamma mia. And when I carve the eye, I do it 500 feet in the air. È vero. Hi, Luigi. I take this photo. I stand on top of the head of President Washington. And, my friends, how do all the 400 men and Luigi, how do we get to the top of the mountain every day to work? 706 steps. È vero. That's right. Up and down, every day, amici. Hey, that's like climbing halfway up the Empire State Building. And because I am chief carver, they pay me more than anyone else. $1.50 an hour. Hey, amici, that doesn't sound like much, but remember, this is the Depression, and $1.50 an hour is very good pay. Oh, signore, amici, all this time I don't tell you my name. Sono Luigi Del Bianco, chief carver on Mount Rushmore. I come to America from Italy to live, to work, to carve. Ma, I miss my wife, Nicoletta. She is Abruzzese, eh? Che bellezza. I miss my sons, Silvio, Cesare, Vincenzo. So I bring them with me to South Dakota to live with me while I carve the faces. My boys, they love to live in the Black Hills. Do you know what they love? They love, come si dice? The cowboys and Indians. In fact, Vincenzo, the one looking down, he thinks he's an Indian. Eh? He wants to ride every horse he sees. And I say to him, Vincenzo, if you want to learn to ride a horse, I get my brothers to teach you. Eh? But guess what, amici? Vincenzo doesn't listen to me. He is a scorciamenza. He doesn't listen to anybody. Eh? And one day, he sees a horse. And I say to him, Vincenzo, that horse, you cannot ride that horse. that horse belongs to my boss, Gotzenborglum. So Vincenzo promises he won't ride the horse. And when I leave, what do you think Vincenzo does? He gets on top of that horse and he says, I am an Indian chief. This is my horse now. And then Vincenzo looks down. And then who do you think is standing next to the horse? My boss, Gotzenborglum. And Borglum says, Vincenzo, why are you sitting on top of my horse? And Vincenzo smiles. Mr. Borglum smiles. And Mr. Borglum, he touches the back of my son's neck and he squeezes tight. And Mr. Borglum picks up my son and he throws Vincenzo off the horse. And my little boy flies through the air like a little bird. A beep, bop, bop, a beep, bop, bop, a beep, bop, bop, ba-boom. Hey, my wife Nicoletta sees this. Amici, do you think she's happy about this? Let me tell you something. My wife Nicoletta, she's a piccinina, 4 feet 10 inches tall. But she walks up to Mr. Borglum and she says, if you touch my son again, I won't allow my husband to come back to carve your faces. Amici, this is my boss my wife is talking to like this, huh? Mr. Borglum looks down at my wife and says, Mrs. Del Bianco? Whatever you say. And now my wife has the respect of the master. And Vincenzo says to me, Papa, I'm sorry I don't listen to you. I say, that's all right, Vincenzo, because you'll never listen to me. But if you want to learn to ride a horse, my brothers have to teach you. Signore, amici, would you like to meet my brothers? I show you. Guarda, my brothers. Hey, you don't believe these are my brothers? Yeah, signore, do you know that Luigi, I become a blood brother with the chief of Lakota Sioux Indians? See, my sons become blood brothers. And the Indians teach my son how to ride a horse. And when he is done, Mr. Borglum says, now you could ride my horse, Vincenzo. And Vincenzo does. Look at my boy, he's so happy, eh? And to thank the chief for teaching him, I carved the chief's beautiful face, quanta si bello. And amici, every Sunday we go to the, come si dice, the reservation. And do you know what my wife Nicoletta does? She cooks macaroni and sauce for the whole Indian tribe. That's right. She teaches the Indian ladies how to cook the sauce. They love my wife's sauce. And before we eat, I always say 2 things. You can say as well. I say, salute, 100 anni, good health, 100 years. Oh, amici, I forget to tell you, I have to get back to work. I have to finish carving these faces. Look at the faces. Each face, 60 feet tall, huh? The nose, 21 feet long. The mouth, 18 feet wide. Can you imagine the size of the meatball my wife would have to make for a mouth that big? Mi dispiace, I make a joke. My friends in Portchester, they ask me, Luigi, how do you carve these faces? They're so big. I say, Maronami, you have no idea. This is, how do you say? A unique process. Maybe you think to yourself, how do they do this? How do they carve these faces? I'm going to show you, signori. But I must show you the mountain before the faces are there. Eh? Guarda, no faces. Very different, huh? And signore, the first thing we must do before we carve the faces is point. This is a model, a 5-foot model of the head of George Washington. Do you see the pole sticking out from the top of the head? Do you see the string that comes down? There is a weight at the bottom of that string. That is called a pointing machine. And my job is to measure a specific point, maybe the tip of the nose. And I take that point, that measurement, and I move it to the big face with a big pointing machine. Do you know we must move 10,000 points from little face to big face to carve out the face? Look, signore, There is the pointing machine on the small face. We take the measurements, then we move to the big pointing machine on the big face, and we transfer the point. Yes, pointing is a very important part of the process, but you have to be perfect when you point. If you measure wrong and you take off too much stone, you cannot put the stone back. Must be perfecto. So first, we point. Next, we blast. Ba-boom, eh? Look at this, very, very, oh, ba-ba. You cannot carve the stone with a hammer and a chisel. The faces are too big. We take off most of the stone on Mount Rushmore with dynamite. But again, amici, we cannot make mistakes when we blast. If we blast off too much stone, you cannot put it back. You have to be perfect when you blast. So, point, blast. Next, we drill. Look at the men, how they drill. They drill down, down, down to within maybe 3 inches of each measured point. See, they get lowered from the winch and cable down, down, down in the bosun seat. And when they get to the part they have to drill, they drill. Look at the men. They are drilling. They are drilling the face of George Washington. He slowly comes to life. Right now, his face is a little faccia brutta, a little ugly, but it's going to get better, I promise you. So, everyone, point, blast, drill. Next, we honeycomb. Look at the men. They are drilling holes very close together, amici. Why do we do that? Well, it gives them more control when we break off the holes. And that takes us now to the finished part of the face. Very important part of the process. Point, blast, drill, honeycomb, and then we finish. So NOIAW Luigi, I am on the mountain, and next to me is a 5-foot mask of Abraham Lincoln. On the other side is the big face, 60 feet. And my job now, I do not measure. I use the hands of the artist to study the small face and then go to the big face to give it refinement of expression, something only an artist can do. And when I am done, it looks a little like this. So, my friends, I just show you the 5-part process of how we carve the faces. Point, blast, drill, honeycomb, finish. Bravissimo. My friends in Portchester, they ask me, Luigi, do you have many problems when you try to carve these faces? And I say, Mamma mia, you have no idea how many problems we have. But I tell you this, we don't give up. We find another way. I'm going to show you the original model of Mount Rushmore. Eh? Very different, eh? Look at Mr. Lincoln, he has a body. Mr. Washington has a body. He looks like he's going to get up and walk away. Amici, why did we not carve the faces with the body? I'm going to tell you why. Because the stone beneath the faces is called pegmatite stone. Pegmatite stone is filled with crystals like mica and quartz. When you try to carve stone with crystals inside, the stone falls apart. We have a very big problem carving below the faces. But we don't give up. We find another way. You know what we do? We just carve the faces. But I think they look very nice this way. Eh? This is how we start. This is how we finish. Oh, President Jefferson. What's he doing over there? Signore, did you know President Jefferson was supposed to be the first face on the mountain? But what happens, huh? We hit the pegmatite stone, the mica, quartz. See, the bad stone, the pegmatite, isn't just below the faces. We hit it in the faces too. And when we try to carve Jefferson, he falls apart. We have a very big problem. But we don't give up. We take dynamite, we blast off the bad face, and we put Mr. Jefferson on the other side of Washington, where you see him today. And this is why, amici, President Roosevelt, he looks a little smushy, smushy, you know, because he had to move over to one. But I think he's used to it by now, huh? Sono io Luigi. I am carving the lip of President Jefferson. Amici, one day I am home in Portchester. I have my wine, and I listen to the radio, and I sing my Italian songs. Maybe I sing a little for you? Una canzone, un momento, O sole mio, sta in fronte a te. O sole mio, sta in fronte a te. O sole mio, sta in fronte a te, sta in fronte a te. But amici, I get a phone call from Mr. Borglum and he says, Bianco, you must come to the mountain subito. There is a crack developing in the lip of Jefferson. It is filled with pegmatite stone. The crack grows and grows, and I trust only you to fix it. Hey, amici, what do? I get in my car, and I drive for 1,800 miles to South Dakota. And because there is no Italian food in South Dakota, I put in the back seat of my car, provolone, soprasette, capogola, because I have to have my Italian food, And I walk up those 706 steps, amici. And I take out that bad crack, and I put in a new piece of stone. And I point it, and I carve it, and I finish it, and amici, when I am done, you cannot even tell the crack was there. So I guess you can say that Luigi, I saved the face of Thomas Jefferson. Oh, signore, I look at my watch. I have to leave you now. I have to finish measuring the eye of the president. But before I go, I want to tell you one more thing. Please, send to me. When I was a little boy in Italia, I have a dream to come to America to carve something special. Amici, signore, does my dream come true? See, this is my passion, to be an artiste. My friends, do you have a dream, a passion, something you love to do, something you need to do? I tell you, do it. Work hard. Give the gift you have. Live your life. La vita bella. I am Luigi Del Bianco, and I say to you, and you can say to me, ciao. And that is my grandpa, Luigi Del Bianco, chief carver on Mount Rushmore. That's right. He came from Italy to America, and he carved presidents' faces. If that is not the American dream, I don't know what is. Now, I must tell you that everybody always asks me, what did your grandfather do after Mount Rushmore? I mean, how do you follow this? How do you follow Mount Rushmore? Well, my grandfather was a very gifted artist, but he was like many of our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. He was an immigrant. He loved and appreciated his new life. He loved the work. We know the Italian work ethic, right? Very strong work ethic. So he just wanted to put food on the family. So he created his own studio in Portchester, where he lived, and he carved about 500 headstones with his memorial stone carving business in our local cemetery. That is, to me, a legacy in itself. He went back to Italy many times to be with family and friends. He was given a plaque by the National Sculpture Society for his work as a stone carver. All right, everybody always wants to know which of these boys was my father. Well, unfortunately, it was Vincenzo who didn't listen to anybody. I have to tell you, that never stopped. My father loved living in the Black Hills, but he didn't want to go back to New York. When he went to Portchester, he still acted like the Indian chief. And my father had a dream and a passion too. He wanted to go back and ride a horse again. So here he is at 7, and here he is at 65, riding a horse again at Mount Rushmore. but nobody threw him off this time. He was too big. This is my Aunt Gloria. She wasn't even born when Mount Rushmore was being carved, but I want to acknowledge her because she is so proud of my grandfather's great accomplishment. That's my grandfather's bust again. Here are a few other pieces my grandfather did that the family is lucky enough to have. A bust of my Uncle Silvio. A mosaic of Abraham Lincoln, just incredible. Washington, Roosevelt, motherhood. Now, when I had a dream and a passion too. It was always my dream to perform this show at Mount Rushmore. So in 2011, I told the staff that I would come and do shows throughout the whole 4th of July weekend for a reasonable fee. And their response was, "We don't have a budget to pay you." And I said, "That's okay. I'll do it for nothing. That's how much this means to me." And their response was, "Well, we really don't have room for you on the schedule." Can you believe that? Well, I thought of my grandfather and how he persevered as an immigrant and as an artist in this country. So I persevered, and I very politely, harassed the staff at Mount Rushmore over and over again until finally they broke down and I was invited there. This is me in the studio being my grandpa. There he is in the studio. There I am in the same studio, bringing him to life. I am Luigi, you are Luigi. It was just a day that I'll never forget. I'm trying to tell this story everywhere I go. This is the Italian American Museum, which is actually being renovated into an incredible place. I can't wait to see it. But there is an exhibit, thanks to Dr. Joseph Scelsa, about my grandpa. I even went to a national television show. Check this out.
I would like you to make a Mount Rushmore cake.
But I'm excited. We are going to get your grandpa the recognition that he deserves.
Fantastic.
Okay? Roosevelt should be over a little bit. You moved them too much?
Oh, we got a lot of Rice Krispie treats.
Right. All right, let's cut that. Colors. You wet your brush with a little alcohol. Go over what I go over. Oh, that's good. So, what do you think? Thank you guys so much. Who wants to see some cake?
Yeah, that's the Cake Boss. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the program, but Buddy Velastro and his people made a 7-foot Mount Rushmore out of cake. That is a cake. We had a Mount Rushmore Day in Portchester, New York to honor my grandpa. And now the 2 million people who watch the show will learn about the Italian chief carver. I realized that many people in my hometown had never heard of Luigi. So I persevered and raised $25,000 to have a memorial plaque, which you can see if you come to Portchester. So the people there will never forget him. I'm a big lover and a big advocate of preserving history, and I'm sure you are as well. I created a website, LuigiMountRushmore.com. You can go to this website and find out more about my grandpa. You could also find out the rest of this story, which I will share with you now. I have to start with this book. Do you see this book? It was written in 1985 by Rex Allen Smith, The Carving of Mount Rushmore. Would you believe that Luigi Del Bianco isn't mentioned once? Not once. The chief carver. It's as if he didn't exist. That makes me think of my Uncle Caesar, my grandfather's youngest son, who slammed his fist on the table and said, "Hey, that's like talking about the Yankees and not mentioning DiMaggio." And my uncle was right. And when I saw how upset my Uncle Caesar was, it brought me back to that time when I was a little boy with my grandpa and our connection. I am Luigi, you are Luigi. And so my uncle and I decided that we would find out the rest of the story because, as you know, history doesn't always tell you the whole story. We decided to team up together to find out the truth once and for all. For me, it started with my first trip to Mount Rushmore in 1988. I asked the staff, "How are you acknowledging the chief carver, the most important carver on the mountain?" This is what they showed me. This is a plaque of all the 400 people who worked on the mountain, from laborers to drillers to secretaries to the man who put the soul into the faces of the president. To me, that was like taking Clark Gable out of Gone with the Wind and making him an extra. It was just patently wrong. So my uncle and I decided that we would prove a case for our ancestor. We went to the biggest library in the world, the Library of Congress, where we researched papers written by Guts and Borglum. Could we find out how important my grandpa was? Indeed we did. We found papers like this, where Borglum writes, "He is worth any 3 men I could find in America for this particular type of work here and now." You should know that we found out that my grandfather quit Mount Rushmore several times because of harassment and bullying, arguments about the wage that he wasn't being paid. And Borglum would always woo my grandfather back, sometimes paying him out of his own pocket. My grandfather quit. He came back, and Borglum would always say the same thing. "Bianco, as you know, is back, and his presence emphasizes the frightful handicap this work labors under. He is the only intelligent, efficient stone carver on the work who understands the language of the sculptor." Yep, my grandfather stays at Mount Rushmore until he leaves again, vowing never to return. And Borglum writes, "For the purpose of Washington's red tape, a portion of our better men are designated as carvers. There are no carvers on the mountain. There has never been but one, and he refused to return because of the chronic sabotage directed at him by influences in Rapid City and the Park Department." So think about this. Not only is my grandfather chief carver, he has to train many of the untrained miners who were hired to work on the mountain. He also experienced harassment and bullying and sabotage. I don't know the nature of that sabotage. My grandfather was very proud. He never talked about it. We'll never know the truth. All I know is that my grandfather refused to come back, and the faces were still not finished. And Borglum refused to let untrained hands touch those faces. So Borglum was desperate. And in 1940, toward the end of the carving, he wrote to my grandfather, "Dear Bianco, I wish you would come as soon as you can if you want to be of help to me. I must finish the faces by the 1st of July, and all of them, I need you. Your pay will be exactly what it was before. You are the only man who is on that pay." Well, I'm happy to tell you that after 2 years of staying away from the mountain, my grandfather returns. He returns to finish the faces. He is the only man working on the mountain in 1940. And I still have that image in my head of a solitary 4 faces, giant faces, and my grandfather finishing them like Borglum needed him to. And do you know what? We took those papers that we found here that prove incredible importance, and we shared them with the people at Mount Rushmore. And we said, surely after reading these papers, you will give my grandfather the plaque that he deserves. And do you know what Mount Rushmore said? Your grandfather was not the chief carver. He was a worker. He will be credited on the large plaque with all the 400 workers. Can you believe that? After seeing empirical evidence? Do you know we shared these papers for 25 years? And over those 25 years, we heard the same answer. Your grandfather was not the chief carver, he was a worker. Well, I was ready to give up, but I decided to go over the heads of Mount Rushmore, and they resented that, but I felt I had no choice. I went to the head of all the national parks in the Midwest region of the country. The gentleman's name was Michael Reynolds, and when I handed those papers to him, he said, "This is very impressive. Let me talk to the people at Rushmore to get them to change their minds." I thought I had made a breakthrough. 1 month later, I got a letter from Michael Reynolds. Do you know what it said? Your grandfather is not the chief carver. He was a worker. Blah, 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 blah. Mount Rushmore got to him too. This time I really felt like I hit a wall. But then along came someone else, Michael Reynolds' successor, Cam Shawley. And when I decided, what do I have to lose? 25 years, I may as well give him the papers and see what he says. He said the same thing Michael Reynolds did. This is very impressive. Let me talk to the people at Mount Rushmore, see if I can get them to change their mind. And I thought to myself, oh my God, don't talk to the people at Mount Rushmore. They'll get to you too. But you know what? They didn't get the Cam Shally. Cam Shally was different. He had the guts and the courage to do something nobody else would do. And in the end, finalmente, as my grandpa would say, this finally happened.
The man depicted here was arguably a cut above the other stone carvers he worked with. Acknowledging that required a rewriting of the history of one of our nation's most beloved monuments. Jim Axelrod takes us to the Black Hills of South Dakota.
Mount Rushmore's designer, Gutzen Borglum, once said he hoped the faces would remain unchanged until the wind and rain alone shall wear them away. The monument, carved into granite, was designed to be as enduring as it was inspiring.
The team that created this memorial exemplifies the perseverance of the American spirit.
Which is why this ceremony held yesterday was so remarkable, as the National Park Service marked a change at Mount Rushmore.
3, 2, 1.
A small but significant revision to the story of its creation. 48 years after his death, an Italian immigrant named Luigi Del Bianco was officially recognized as Mount Rushmore's chief carver. So there he is, performing a little surgery.
Yeah, it is plastic surgery.
On Thomas Jefferson.
It's really granite surgery.
As Luigi Del Bianco's grandson Lou explained to us, the chief carver was the master craftsman in charge of refining the expression in the faces.
So the twinkle in Lincoln's eye.
Yep.
Or Jefferson's lips.
Yep.
That's Luigi Del Bianco's work?
Yes.
Since Rushmore's completion in 1941, the 400 laborers had always been saluted as a group. But for the last 30 plus years, the Del Bianco family had been making the case Luigi wasn't just part of the crowd.
If we're looking at Rushmore, what of Luigi Del Bianco's work am I seeing that separates him out and makes him deserving of his own plaque?
Well, when people tell me their impression of the faces, they say that there's a humanity. There's a humanity in that granite. And I'm convinced that my grandfather helped bring that humanity out.
Trained in Italy as a stone carver, Luigi Del Bianco came to America in 1908 at the age of 16, settling eventually in Port Chester, New York, where he opened a business.
So in Port Chester, New York, there are headstones carved by the same man who did Rushmore?
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times an older person in town would say, "Can you believe it? The man who carved the president's faces carved my mother's headstone." Unbelievable.
Lou Del Bianco grew up knowing all about his grandfather's special role at Rushmore.
What do we have in here?
And those are about 75 documents from the Library of Congress.
Including testimony from Gutzen Borglum.
He is worth any 3 men I can find in America for this particular type of work here and now.
This is Borglum's writing.
Oh, yeah.
But nothing Lou showed the Park Service would change the narrative, at least not until Cam Shally took over the regional office in charge of Rushmore.
You know, there's a pay sheet that has his name, Chief Carver, $1.50 an hour.
The more Shally read of what Lou sent him, the more he realized the story of Rushmore needed rewriting.
I found myself wondering if we should change course here.
So Shally dispatched a couple of National Park Service historians to Lou's basement in Port Chester.
They went through the booklet that I showed you. By the 4th page, one of the historians said, "Well, you sold me, let's go have lunch."
And after years of making Luigi's case, the official policy was overturned.
We have Luigi Del Bianco in that visitor center. There are pictures of him, his name's in there. We just haven't called him Chief Carver, and now we will.
Well, now we all know Gusten Borglum, of course, but he didn't do it alone. There were about 400 people who helped him.
The decision made at headquarters may take a little while to filter down to the tours.
We got this recognition coming to Luigi Del Bianco. It's kind of a neat part of the story, isn't it?
I don't know that part of the story, so I can't say.
Are you
I'm
going to have
sorry.
to brush up on Luigi?
Well, I don't know. Maybe.
But Lou Del Bianco isn't concerned, knowing he's got history on his family side, and now a plaque to prove it.
I never get tired of watching that video. September 16th, 2017. There's Cam Shally, who made it all happen, and I was so thrilled to have him unveil that plaque with me. The whole family came, La Familia. And if you ever decide to go to Mount Rushmore, I hope you'll look for Luigi. He'll be looking for you. I love this. At the same time the plaque was being unveiled at Rushmore, another plaque was being unveiled somewhere else in the world.
Bravi, bravi, bravi. Luigi Del Bianco, capo scalpellino sul Monte Rushmore, un fiero friulano.
This is the little paese that my grandfather comes from. It's called Del Bianco, Borgo del Bianco, where the Del Biancos originate. Doesn't it look like 19th century still? And the people there, they're just as proud of him, if not more. Now, when the historians were working with me to find out whether my grandfather really deserved recognition, they said to me, Lou, this is an incredible story. You need to tell this story. You're a storyteller. I took their advice. I was inspired by them. And here's my book, Out of Rushmore's Shadow, the Luigi Del Bianco story. What I told you tonight was just the tip of the iceberg. You will learn all about my grandfather's incredible immigrant journey. You'll certainly relate to it. You'll read even more documents, hear of his story on Rushmore, and then you'll read the 25-year roller coaster ride to get him recognized. And let me tell you, it reads like a Grisham novel. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble online, but I find that many people like to have their books signed and addressed to them. So I did send Eileen an order form, which I believe will be emailed to you, so that if you'd like, you can order it from me directly, and it'll give you instructions as to how you would like it addressed, and then I will sign a copy just for you. So that's an option that I hope that you'll take advantage of. I hope that you'll get the book for your family's legacy. This is something that we as Italian Americans, I know, are very, very proud of. Great news story for our community. And with that, I am going to stop the share and see if you have any questions. Thank you for letting me tell you about my grandpa. I'm sure you were a great audience. See if I can get it back here. Thank you so much for listening. Do we have, Eileen, would we like to do some Q&A now? If anybody has any questions about my grandfather, about Mount Rushmore, I'd be happy to answer those questions. Okay, so I'm going to be reading from the chat. Is that what I'm going to do? Okay, let me bring that.
Sure.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay. Right, I'm in the chat. I don't see.
We have one question there, Lou. Did your grandfather know the Picciarelli brothers?
Okay, so that is.
Bravo to you, and the person leaving the comment is Roseanne Martorella.
Thank you, Roseanne. Thank you. Hi, just letting you know that I haven't forgotten about you. No problem. Okay, got it. Okay, so did my grandfather know the Picciarelli brothers? I really don't know. I don't have any documentation of that. My grandfather lived in Portchester. He lived 25 minutes, a half hour from the Bronx, where they had their studio. A lot of these stone carvers knew each other in the New York metropolitan area. My grandfather was all over the New York metropolitan area, all over the country and in the world. So, and he was younger than the Picciarelli brothers, but you know, it wouldn't surprise me if he rubbed shoulders with them. I wish I knew the answer to that, because they are incredible in their own right. I'm sure you all know about the lions in front of the public library and the Lincoln Memorial, and so many other great pieces were done by these incredible, you know, Italian Americans. And I'm just so pleased that my grandfather is in such incredible company with them. Maybe someday I'll find out. Please, any other questions? I'm happy to answer any other questions you have.
Lou, you have two other questions in the Q&A room. How long did it take him to carve Mount Rushmore?
Mount Rushmore started in 1927, and it was not considered completed until 1941. Now, mind you, it was technically never completed. You saw from the model there that they could only go so far. But they didn't work all year. They didn't work all year. The winters were too brutal in South Dakota, so they only worked 6 months. And there were a couple of years spread throughout the 14 years where the money just wasn't available. And that was one of the reasons my grandfather quit. So they really worked in real time over the 14 years, about 5 years.
Lou, you have another question. Does anyone else in your family have the same artistic ability?
My Uncle Silvio, who you saw that bust of, he had ability. He actually studied under my grandfather for a little while, but I think he was fairly intimidated by my grandfather's great talent, so he gave it up. In terms of my grandfather's grandchildren, no. None of us have gone into stone carving or you know, the visual arts in that way. Let's see. My name is Cardarelli, also Cardarelli. Oh, my great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather were also stone carvers. Wow. In fact, they migrated to Paris from Italy to build bridges. I wonder if, were they from Abruzzo? That's where my grandmother's family was from. Not to assume that all the Cardarellis were from Abruzzo, but that's where they were from. That's amazing. Your grandfather learned to carve in Italy, but from whom? Did he do any works in the Paese in and around there? Great question. You should know that my grandfather, when he first came to this country in 1910, he didn't settle in Portchester, New York. He settled in Barre, Vermont. His cousin Pietro sponsored him, but I'm getting ahead of myself. When my grandfather was 12 years old, in Meduno, in Borgo del Bianco, he carved a little dog out of wood, and my great-grandfather Vincenzo said, "You have talent." And he did something with my grandfather that many parents did with their children 100 years ago. They sent them to study with a master. And so my grandfather was not sent to in Italy. He was sent to Austria. The nearest carving school to my grandfather was in Austria because he lived close to the Austrian border. And he studied under an Italian stone carver named Adamo Aloisi. I don't know anything about Adamo. His name is on my grandfather's graduation certificate, which you could see if you get the book. And he was an apprentice and studied for 3 years until 1905. And then he studied further in Venice for another 2 to 3 years. So by the time he came to America, he was a trained stone carver in 1910. I don't have any record of any pieces he carved when he was in Meduno. I just don't have those records. I would have to go to Friuli and find out, which I plan to do, by the way. He spent 5 years in Barre, Vermont as a memorial stone carver, and then he did something that many immigrants did back then. When World War I broke out and Italy was at war, he went back to Italy in 1915 and fought with the Italian army. And then in 1920, came back to America, back to Barre, Vermont. So he studied for 5 to 6 years in Italy, probably studied more when he was in Barre, and studied under Borglum, I'm sure, for 12 years, because Borglum was a genius. Let's see. Okay, great-grandfather Luigi Cardarelli was stone carver from the area of Abruzzo. You're killing me. We have to be related. We have to be related. Cardarelli's from Abruzzo? All right, Paisan, how are you? We should, you know, email me after this because I'd like to know some more information. That's great. All right, thanks for this information. We are definitely related.
Lou, you have another question in the Q&A side from Chris Kerner. How did your grandparents meet?
That's a great question. Oh, I love that you got that you asked that question. Here it is in a nutshell. I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version. When my grandfather came back after the First World War in 1920, he went back to Barre, Vermont again, and he met another stone carver called Alfonso Scaffa. And Alfonso Scaffa said, I work for the great sculptor Gutzon Borglum. He has a studio in Stamford, Connecticut. Come with me so I can introduce you. And he brings Del Bianco down there, and Borglum hires my grandfather on the spot and makes him his assistant stone carver. Now, Alfonso, in the meantime, brings Luigi 15 minutes south of Stamford to Port Chester, New York, where he stays with Alfonso Scaffa's family. And he introduces him to his sister-in-law, a diminutive 4'10" beauty named Nicoletta Cardarelli. And the rest is history. My grandfather falls in love, there's a courtship, and they're married the next year. So Alfonso Scaffa not only introduces my grandfather to the great Gutzon Borglum, he introduces him to my grandmother, his sister-in-law. You just can't make this stuff up. Thank you for asking that question. I killed two birds with one stone. How did he meet Borglum? How did he meet my grandmother? Let's see here. Oh, what other sculptures were done by the designer Borglum? You know, I have photos that I could show you. Is it possible for me to go back into screen share and still do the Q&A?
Yes, you can. We'll probably see your desktop, but if that's okay, sure.
That's all right. All right, so here it is. This is the Wars of America Memorial in Newark, New Jersey. This was actually considered the biggest bronze sculpture in America in the 20s. And my grandfather worked on this with Borglum. They created this in the Borglum studio in Stamford, Connecticut. There are 40 figures on this, and 40 figures on this sculpture, and they depict soldiers from the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, the Civil War, all the way up to World War I. In fact, if you look at Washington in the front there, those are my grandfather's legs. Borglum was very fond of my grandfather's legs. That's all I can tell you. So my grandfather modeled a lot for Borglum. And it just cracks me up anyway. So that's a little FYI there. So that was a piece done by Borglum. If you go into the rotunda in Washington, I don't have the photo. He did an incredible sculpture of Lincoln's bust in the rotunda of the Capitol. There's also a seated Lincoln in Newark, New Jersey. Borglum also did many paintings and other works as well. But that's it. And of course, there's this, which he started but never completed. Are you familiar with Stone Mountain in Georgia? Borglum started to carve these Confederate generals, and my grandfather started out as the chief carver. But he got into a fight with the sponsors of this memorial, the daughters of the Confederacy, who were silent partners with the KKK. And the KKK wanted Borglum to change his design so that it would include a grateful slave thanking his master. And Borglum refused to do that. He destroyed the models, which were the property of the Daughters of the Confederacy, and there was a high-speed chase by the police, chasing Borglum and his little son Lincoln, and he got over the border. And when Doane Robinson, the state historian for South Dakota, read about this, he said, this is the kind of person I need to carve Mount Rushmore. So that's kind of like a dramatic story about Borglum. That's my grandfather carving, and there's Borglum above him wearing a hat. So those are some of the other works that Borglum did. That included Luigi. Any other questions? I won't be able to read them now since the screen share is up, I don't think.
Lou, I can read them to you. We have a question from Beatrice Corbett. What other sculptures were done by the designer Borglum? Is the Stanford studio in existence?
Great question. The Stanford studio is not in existence. It was converted into a home. In fact, you know who lived in there for many, many years was the cartoonist Mort Walker, who did Beetle Bailey. It's in northern Stanford. So the studio is somewhere. I was there recently. I visited it for the first time, and it was really fun to compare photos in my grandfather's collection when he used to work there, to see the exterior of the studio and to see it now completely redone. So the building itself exists, but it doesn't exist as a studio. It's someone's home.
Lou, we have another question from Roseanne Martorella. Sculptural heritage is so important to our culture and identity. Are you worried about their destruction?
Yeah, I am. I can understand people's feelings about the Confederate statues being out in public and honored in such a way. These people were, at the end of the day, traitors to our union. And if they are to be removed, I would like them to be removed so that they can be whole and put in a museum, so that they can be learned from in the same way that people go to Germany to the Holocaust camps, so that they could learn that never to repeat this kind of history. So in my opinion, I think they probably should be taken from a place of honor and put in a place where we could learn from them. That's my opinion. In terms of Mount Rushmore, obviously I would not like to see a Mount Rushmore taken down. I don't see that happening. What I think should happen, again, this is just my opinion, I think they should remain. And I think these presidents should be honored for their great accomplishments. But I think that the education at the mountain could be expanded to tell the whole story of each president. Yes, 2 were slave owners. Yes, 2 were involved in the extermination of Native Americans. Tell the whole story. History can be messy. They were people of their time. That's my 2 cents about the. But I'm always more than willing to listen to people who have different feelings. I've had Native American come to my presentation and tell me how upset they are that I'm doing a program honoring Mount Rushmore. And I only tell them, I say, look, you have your truth, I understand it, but this is my truth. This is a story about my grandfather that I'm very proud of. So when I talk about my hero, I'm not necessarily talking about Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt. I'm talking about my grandpa. So anyway, I will get off my soapbox with that one. That's a tough one.
Lou, we don't have any remaining questions. So at this point, if you're comfortable with it, I can bring Dr. MaryRose Barranco-Morris back to close out.
Absolutely. Everybody, thank you so much for letting me tell you about my grandpa and for sharing this story with you. Like I said, the book is available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes & Noble, and you can order it via the order form on that you'll receive from Eileen. And feel free at any time, whoever wants to close out can do so now.
Okay, MaryRose should appear on your screen in a moment.
Thank you again, MaryRose. Thank you, Phyllis, as well. And thank you, Eileen, for bringing me here. This was a pleasure. Okay, should I fill with another song?
Hold on. I guess I've been muted. Can you hear me now?
I hear you loud and clear, MaryRose.
Okay, my mic was muted. I'm so sorry. I've been talking and nobody's listening. Thank you so much, Lou, and thank you, audience, for being so interested in this program. We had an amazing registration. It's fascinating, Lou. I hope you get to tell the world about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. don't forget, you can get the book. I want one too. I want you to sign it. And bravo, bravissimo.
Grazie tanto.
Good night, everybody.
Night all. State bene.